Today's story begins in a grand boardroom, inside the tallest skyscraper in the city. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealed a breathtaking skyline. Inside, a table made of polished mahogany stretched endlessly, lined with chairs occupied by the most powerful men and women in the business world. At the head of the table sat Richard Hayes, one of the richest billionaires alive, a man whose name alone could shake markets. And at the far end of this very same table sat a man who didn't seem to belong there. His clothes were plain, his shoes were worn, and though his hair was combed neatly, you could tell they weren't styled by some five-star salon. He sat quietly, hands folded, waiting for the meeting to begin. His name was Samuel Ortiz, a single father of two who worked as a janitor in the very building he now sat in. The room buzzed with murmurs as Samuel entered minutes earlier, escorted by the CEO's assistant. Everyone wondered, why is he here? What's going on? No one could figure it out. Then the billionaire, Richard Hayes, broke the silence. "So, you're the man everyone's talking about," Richard said with a smirk. His voice carried both curiosity and condescension. "The janitor who thinks he can save our company." There were soft chuckles around the room. Samuel looked down at his hands, calm, composed. He didn't answer immediately. He wasn't intimidated. At least, not anymore. Richard leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Tell me, Samuel, what makes you think you have anything to offer a board like this?" Samuel finally lifted his gaze. His eyes were steady, clear, and surprisingly warm. When he spoke, his voice was gentle yet firm. "I don't think," Samuel said quietly. "I know." The laughter grew louder this time. Executives exchanged glances. One of them muttered, "He's lost his mind." Another whispered, "What is this? Some kind of charity stunt?" But Samuel didn't flinch. He continued, "You see, Mr. Hayes, I speak 9 languages." The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by stunned silence for half a second, then Richard burst out laughing. 9 languages, he repeated between chuckles. "What is this, a talent show? Do you think speaking a few fancy words is going to impress me?" Samuel smiled softly. "It's not about impressing you. It's about understanding people." Richard's laughter faded into a smirk. "All right, let's hear it. Say something in French." Without missing a beat, Samuel replied fluently, his accent flawless. "Monsieur Hayes, je suis honoré de vous rencontrer. Mais je crains que vous sous-estimes le pouvoir des mots." A murmur rippled through the room. One of the French investor's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Richard waved it off. Okay, Spanish." Samuel's lips curved into a small smile as he spoke, "Por supuesto. Es mi lengua materna. Pero también puedo hablar en italiano, alemán, árabe, ruso." The words flowed like water, each language crisp and authentic. With every sentence, more jaws dropped. Board members who spoke those languages nodded in astonishment. Samuel finished in Japanese, bowing his head slightly. The room was dead silent. Richard's smirk was gone. One of the executives finally whispered, "He's telling the truth." Richard cleared his throat. "Impressive. Parlor trick. But why does that matter here?" Samuel leaned forward, his voice calm but now carrying a weight that silenced even the billionaire. "Because your company is on the verge of collapse. Not because your product is bad, but because you've forgotten the people you're trying to serve. You've ignored markets because you don't speak their language, literally and culturally. You think translation apps and marketing teams are enough. They're not. Words are more than words. They're trust. They're respect. They're connection." The boardroom was frozen. Samuel's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried conviction born from experience, from struggle. He continued, "You're losing billions overseas because you don't understand the people. You make deals that fail because you don't listen. You treat customers like numbers, not like humans with stories, traditions, and pride. That's why I'm here. Because I do understand. I've lived among these people. I've worked alongside them, and I can help you rebuild that trust." Richard stared at him, eyes narrowing, but not in anger, this time in thought. "And what do you want in return, Samuel? Money? A title?" Samuel shook his head. "No, all I want is a chance. A chance to prove that respect and empathy can save this company. And if I fail, I'll walk away quietly. But if I succeed." He paused, his voice trembling slightly now, not from fear, but from emotion. "If I succeed, Then maybe my kids will grow up in a world where people are valued for what they bring to the table, not what shoes they wear walking in. There was a long silence. You could hear the hum of the city through the glass. For the first time, Richard Hayes had no comeback. Finally, one of the investors spoke. He's right. We've been bleeding markets in South America and Asia. And if he can bridge those gaps. Another chimed in. Our European partners have been complaining about cultural disconnect for years. This man could be the key. Richard glanced around, realizing the room was shifting toward Samuel. For the first time in decades, the billionaire felt his authority wobble. He stood slowly, walked toward Samuel, and stopped just a foot away. Everyone held their breath. Richard extended his hand. All right, Mr. Ortiz, you've got your chance. Samuel rose, shook his hand firmly, and for the first time that day, he allowed himself a small smile. But the story didn't end there. What Samuel did next didn't just save the company, it transformed it. Samuel was given a small role at first, a consultant for international relations. But what he achieved in the next 6 months shocked the world. He started by meeting the overseas partners himself, no translators, no intermediaries. He spoke their language, not just linguistically, but culturally. He asked about their families, their traditions, their festivals. He didn't just negotiate deals, he built relationships. And those relationships turned into loyalty. Contracts that were about to be cancelled were renewed at better terms. Markets that had been closed reopened. Sales skyrocketed in regions where the company had almost given up. But Samuel didn't stop there. He created a cultural empathy program within the company, training employees to respect and understand the people they served. He brought in language learning programs, cultural immersion sessions, and made sure diversity wasn't just a buzzword but a lived value. The numbers spoke louder than any speech could. In 1 year, profits soared by 38%. Investors who once mocked the idea now credited Samuel for the turnaround. And one day, in the same boardroom where it all began, Richard Hayes stood up and said something no one expected. Ladies and gentlemen, today we appoint our new Vice President of Global Relations, Samuel Ortiz. The room erupted in applause. Samuel's eyes filled with tears, not because of the title, but because he remembered the janitor's uniform he wore just a year ago, and the 2 little faces at home who believed in their dad when no one else did. When Samuel returned home that evening, his kids ran into his arms. He held them tight and whispered, "We did it." And from that day forward, Samuel didn't just speak 9 languages. He spoke one universal language that everyone understood: respect.